Welcome back to my channel. This is Detroit AllyCat, and I'm so happy to have you back on what's supposed to be Spooky Saturday, but it's really Spooky Sunday, but it might not get posted until Spooky Monday. So if you got all that and you're still on for the ride, I can't wait to tell you about the case we're about to jump into. It's really cool. It's really interesting. It's one of a country's best kept secrets, or a shroud of mystery, if that makes sense. Anyway, without further ado, let's get spooky. So let's talk about the incident that happened. It is kind of one of my favorite things to talk about because it's something that normally you don't hear a lot about even till this day. And I'm talking about the country Russia. It seems like whenever they have something that happens over there, or something in history happens over there, it's kind of secretive and they don't really explain it, and it feels like sometimes when you're being told the story, like half of the story is being left out, and I think there's a big reason for that. Russia used to be formerly known as the Soviet Union, and it was like a communist country, and they were very into keeping as what they considered their issues, and they didn't want the whole world seeing it. So a lot of the things that we're just now finding out right now are things that we did not know about Russia or the Soviet Union, and that pertains to this case because I feel like a lot of the things that happened to this case made it more mysterious, because whenever something happened in the Soviet Union, they felt like they needed to tidy it up or make it look good for everyone so that it didn't look like it was a mistake on the country's part, which it wasn't a mistake on the country's part. It's just something that happened in their history. But they take their history very personally. They take their country very personally, and for that reason, there's a lot of things that we just don't know. And an example of that would be Chernobyl, that we're just now finding things out about Chernobyl that we would never know because, it's Russia. So without further ado, let's just talk about the case that we have going on today. It's called Dyatlovs Pass. It's been used in a couple different movies. It's been talked about. There's been documentaries made about it. There's been fiction made about it. But what I'm going to talk about today is just the facts of Dyatlov's Pass, and then I'm going to give you my thoughts on what I think happened and tell you all about that. So let's talk about what Dyatlov's Pass is about. There was an expedition of these 10 students, and it was primarily made up of men, and there were 2 guys, and Igor Dyatlov was actually the leader of the group. And in order to be invited to go on one of Igor's expeditions, it was a great honor. It was a really exciting thing. He'd been known for doing stuff like this, so it was kind of a really exciting thing for everybody that was on this group to go on this trip. And there was one gentleman that was going to be going with them that was actually going to be observing them, and once they completed this trip, they would be given category 3 hiking skill level, which is such a great thing. And so they get ready to go, and they basically hit this town, and they're getting their stuff ready. They're stopping there, and they do a couple things before they're actually going to go off-roading into the rural area. But before that happens, their friend, Yuri Yudin, he had rheumatitis, and he was having a lot of problems with his joints and just his body, and it felt really bad. And he told them hey guys, I can't carry on. And they understood, so they were you know what, you go back and you'll be able to tell them what day we should check in, and you can handle all of our affairs and wait for us by the time we get back. And so, he was really bummed that he couldn't go, but him not being able to go actually saved his life. So that's kind of weird. He ended up living till he was 72 years old. But anyway, he goes back and he waits for them. And this group of people take off down this extremely rural area in Russia. I believe it's like in Siberia or by Siberia. And as they're going to this place that they're going to camp, they pass something called the gulags. And basically what the gulags are is this prison set up for like high-ranking officials. And there's like, it's not like, you know how prisons are normally like surrounded by gates and you can't get off? Well, it's not like that there, because in Siberia, it's got such harsh conditions that you can't run away because you'll die. So it's all these buildings, and basically the gulags are work camps, and they go work and do their stuff. I don't know very much about the gulags, but I just know that it doesn't look like a regular prison, and it's kind of crazy to me that they could leave at any time that they want to, or escape at any time, but they don't because they know that they'll die. So that gives you kind of an idea of like what the terrain was in the area that these people were going. So now we're down to 9 people in the crew, and they make their way to the campsite, and for some reason, like, the weather wasn't that great. Somehow they veer off the path and they end up on the side of a mountain, and for whatever reason they decide that they're going to go ahead and camp on this side of the mountain. Now it's something to note that the place where they actually camped was like on a little bit of a tilt. Igor thought that that would be a good thing to do, is him setting up camp on like that little tiny bit of a downslope was also something he's never done before, and he wanted to get the experience doing it. So he goes ahead and he sets up, and that's where he camps for the night. And they camped about 5:30 p.m. Now here is where we don't really know what happened, but we know the results of what happened, if that made sense to you. So sometime throughout the night, something happened where the group of 9 actually sliced through the tent, went through the tent, and went down towards the wood line. Because where they were actually camped out, there was no woods. There was no like actual trees or anything. It was just straight, plain, like flat earth. And that's where they were camped. And so they sliced through the tent, and 2 of them end up going by a tree area, and there's like a little tiny fire started there, and they are found there eventually with nothing on but their underwear, and I guess they look like they've burned of hypothermia, and they also look like they have burns on their body. And then a little bit before those trees, 2 others are found. It looks like it was actually going back to the camp, and they also died of hypothermia. And then 2 months later, there are 5 more of them, and they're found in this ravine. They had made like a little den in this ravine because it was frozen, and they're found underneath there, and they're found in some of the most mysterious, weirdest circumstances. Like, one of the females, her tongue and her eyes are missing. One of the other people, their face is bashed in. Another one of them is like, same thing, their eyes are missing and they are all messed up. And so when they sent out the people to go find them, they find them in these circumstances, and they also have radiation on 2 of the people's outfits. And when they write the report of what happens, which they closed the report, the investigation basically said that they came upon a force that was not human, and they just closed it out, and that was that. And everybody was like very confused, like what happened to them? Why were they like this? And the thing to note is that this group of 9 people, they weren't just regular like hikers. They were very experienced. They knew what they were doing. They had done this a ton of times. They were category 2. So for them to end up just dying on this expedition, it was just very odd. And there was so questions that were not answered that it just became one of the great world's unsolved mysteries. And for that alone, it was just a very well-known case, but at the same time, I feel like there was a lot of stuff that wasn't actually disclosed. So the investigation concluded that a compelling natural force had caused the death. A compelling natural force. And they said that this force had actually been as strong as a car crash. So what kind of compelling natural force could do that out there? And let's talk about all the different factors that were put into this. The way that they were on the hill is right underneath the mountain. But this mountain was in such a slope that the chance of an avalanche were very, very minimal. So a lot of people said that could have been an avalanche and that's why they could have died. But that didn't make a whole lot of sense because this mountain in particular had not had a lot of avalanches and the slope that it was on was very, very unlikely. Also, a lot of people talked about the different people in the group themselves. So let's talk about the different people in the group. There was Igor Dyatlov. He was 23 years old, and he was the one who actually got the group together. There was Yuri Doroshenko. He died of hypothermia, along with Igor Dyatlov. He died of hypothermia. Ludmila Dubina. She died of internal bleeding from severe chest trauma. And they actually said that they found blood inside of her stomach, and they were speculating all of these crazy things because of that. Gregory Korinchko, he died of hypothermia. Alexander Kolovatov, am I just destroying these names? Totally. He died of hypothermia. Zeneta Kolomogrova died of hypothermia. Rostam Slobodin died of hypothermia. Nikolai Thibodeau-Brignoles, I don't know, I probably messed that up. He was 23 and he died of a fatal skull injury. I guess it looked like the whole back of his skull was completely shattered. And then this person, they had a lot to say about this person. His name was Semyon Zolotaryov, and he was 38 years old, and he died of severe chest trauma. And the thing about Semyon is that he actually was a coach of a skiing group back at the college that they were all from, and he was there to observe the different them actually do the expedition so he could give them their category 3. But they said that he was somehow involved in experimental stuff for the military or the KGB or stuff like that, which I find very bizarre. But there was speculation that he had something to do with that and that he was the reason that all of this happened to these people. And the odd thing about Dyatlov's Pass is that 2 of them actually had radiation on their pants, like I had said. But the thing to note is that the radiation on their pants was kind of a normal thing because these 2 people actually they worked in a factory that dealt with radiation. So for radiation to be on their pants wasn't very abnormal at all. I know that's kind of weird, but when I worked in the military, I worked at an arsenal, and it seemed like it would be a big deal, but when I had to go through the TSA to get on a plane, they detected traces of explosives, and it was a huge ordeal until they found out that I worked at a certain arsenal. So as weird as it is, that does make a lot of sense, even though I really wouldn't want to have radiation on my pants, but I guess that had nothing to do with it. And they had also concluded that, there were these indigenous people that were very close. Pretty sure they're called the Mansis. I don't want to say their name wrong though, so we're just gonna say indigenous people. And they said that there was a possibility that they could have attacked them because there was a picture on the camera, and this group did take pictures of their little expedition, which the pictures are actually really cool and they add a lot of mystery to this story. But in one picture there looks to be like this figure in the background chasing them, but I really think it was just one of the people that was in the expedition. But there were people that said that it was one of the indigenous people coming to hunt them, but from what I heard, these people were a very friendly tribe. They were very peace oriented, and they've never attacked anyone before, and they also didn't even go in that area that time of year. They basically stayed where their tribes were until it was around the summer months because the area was so harsh. So it kind of blows that idea out of the water. And funny enough, there was this huge thing about oh, it must have been a Yeti. Well, I don't believe in Yetis, and they thought that the picture of that guy or whoever that was, I'll show you what the picture is, was a Yeti, but I don't think it was a Yeti. But apparently a Yeti is a big deal in certain parts of Russia, and a lot of people believe in Yetis. So that was a thing too. The journalist reporting on the available parts of the inquest files claimed that it states 6 of the group members died of hypothermia and 3 died of fatal injuries. There were no indications of other people nearby on the area, apart from the 9 travelers. The tent had been ripped open from within, which is something that they thought was very odd because it wasn't something attacked them and tried to get inside the tent. It had actually been the people inside the tent getting out of the tent. The victims had died 6 to 8 hours after their last meal, and they obviously could tell that because they did those, things where you cut them open and check them out. Autopsies, yes, that's what I'm looking for, autopsies. Traces from the camp showed that all the group members left the campsite of their own accord on foot, and that's something that's kind of a big deal too, because when the investigation was done of the campsite, they had noticed that the footprints leading away from the campsite, they weren't running, they were actually just walking. And it was seemed kind of odd because if something horrible was happening to your camp, wouldn't you run away from your camp? Just more of the mystery of Dyatlov's Pass. Some levels of radiation were found only on one victim's clothing. And like I said, that's kind of weird because I've read multiple different things that said that the whole campsite had radiation, that 2 people had radiation. I really think it was 2 people. And then there's other reports that say that 1 person had radiation, but I really think it was 2 people that had radiation. And they had radiation on their clothes because they worked somewhere that would expose them to radiation. The theory of being attacked by indigenous people called the Mansi, so I was right, it's the Mansi people, stated that the fatal injuries of the 3 bodies could not have been caused by human beings because the force of the blows had been too strong and no soft tissue had been damaged, which I don't know is necessarily true because when they actually did the autopsies of the bodies, they found that, and this was part of the big deal of the whole Dyatlov's Pass, is that 2 of the bodies did not have eyeballs, and 1 body did not have a tongue. Everyone made such a huge deal about that. This girl did, and it was one of the females, did not have a tongue. But the thing is that if you die in the wilderness and you're left out for a really long time, and this is one of the bodies that took a couple months to recover, it's probably very likely that the wilderness is going to come and scavenge what they can, and the first thing that they're going to go after is some of the soft organs. And if you died with your mouth open, the tongue would be easy for an animal to get out, and the eyes would be easy for birds to peck, and we all know that birds peck eyeballs out. So it's not too weird that the eyeballs and the tongue was missing, but it does add to the whole creepiness factor. There was a lot more that was talked about. Like, some of the pictures had like this white light with these other 3 lights to the side of it, and people were talking about how the military was conducting like practices to explode or detonate mine bombs, and that could have woken them up or scared them or done something to them, even though the Soviet Union swears that was not going on at the time. But if it was, I don't think that they would tell anybody. So that was kind of like a thing too, and there was just a lot of mystery surrounding this whole like incident. But I'm gonna tell you what I think happened, because I have like an idea of what could have happened. Now, when these people didn't get back to the area they were supposed to in time, you know how I had told you that one of the people in the group had to not go because of his rheumatitis, or he wasn't feeling well, so he was basically waiting for them. He knew that something was wrong when they didn't check in on time, and that was Yuri Yudin. And so they didn't check in time, and so he was like, something's wrong, we have to send people out there. But they waited a couple days because I guess it wasn't like a big deal for people not to show up exactly on time, because sometimes expeditions could run longer than usual, which sounds totally normal. But when they waited like I think 5 or 6 days and they still didn't come back, so then they sent out a search party and they found this situation. And when they found the situation, they found like the tent, and they said the inside of the tent was still like perfectly made up, looked like, you know, like the shoes were laid out and all of their bedding was perfect. And they said that the stove was unassembled and it was on the like not put together and sticking out. But they also said that there was like pieces of food, like half-eaten pieces of food, like they had just had dinner. And that was another big thing about the Dyatlovs Pass, is when they escaped the tent, they weren't wearing the proper like clothing. So whatever they were like ran away from, they had to get out of there quick. So you think about it, they cut open the tent, they ran down the path, and they pretty much died and never went back to the tent. So this is what I think, just so you know. I think that they were probably cooking, and it was like a crazy, you know, one of these things where they had a stove inside the tent, and I think that they actually had a lot of smoke fill up the tent and they couldn't breathe, and they decided that what they were going to do is end up going down by the ravine past the wood line to try to make shelter and like stay there for a little bit and let the smoke get out of the tent and then go back to the tent. But what happened is that it was really snowy and they got confused and hypothermia like set in, and for whatever reason they never came back. And I think that there's a couple different reasons for that. So 35% of hypothermia cases get something called paradoxical hypothermia, where your body tricks itself into thinking that you're actually heating up when you're getting cold. And a lot of people say this is a cruel joke, but if I was dying of freezing to death, which is probably a really horrible and painful death, I would hope that my body would trick me into thinking that I was really way too warm, and that way I wouldn't feel the freezing to death. But that would explain why 2 of the people were all the way down in their underwear. And the other thing that was very strange that they found is that the ones that were found in the den, which I believe it was 4 of them, not 5 of them, they had the clothes on from other people onto them. So I think that there's a chance that like when 2 of their friends died, or a couple of their friends died, they went back to their friends and took their clothes off and put them on to stay warm. Why they didn't go right back up to the tent, I'm not sure. Maybe there was like a blizzard or a snowstorm. It wasn't very far from the tent that they actually died, but they could have been afraid that like the tent was filled with smoke and that they couldn't be in there, so they had to wait at least like, I don't know, like 5 or 6 hours. I don't know how long it would take for your tent to clear out. But there are some issues with my idea, because why didn't they just open the tent and let the smoke out instead of running away, going down there and, you know, hiding? There's still a lot of questions. And what's really interesting is they reopened the case in 2019. Yeah. They reopened the case in 2019 and actually did a full investigation, and they said around July 2020 they had come to some conclusions, and they decided the reason that everybody died the way that they did was there was an avalanche and they were fleeing the avalanche. So that really isn't possible, and I kind of think they just said that there was an avalanche just so that they could basically say, like, you know, case closed, this is over with, nothing to look at, guys. But I don't think it was an avalanche. I don't know. There's so many different things about this story that are so weird. It's just the fact that they were like half naked, they were missing tongues, there was radiation. It's just like all compiled together, but I feel like there's a really simple explanation for all of it, even though I can't really tell you what it is. I can just tell you that it happened and it was really spooky, and that a lot of people talk about it, and I'm telling you about it in my weird way that twists all over the place because it has so many twists all over the place. So yeah, the case is closed, and they say that the avalanche did it, and that's how they all died. So I don't know. Guys, tell me what you think about this story. I hope you enjoyed my take on Dyatlov's Pass. I think it was a little bit schizophrenic sounding personally, but I did the best I can because there's so many weird twists and turns, but I don't know. Alright, thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing day. Give me a thumbs up if you liked it. Anyway, thank you for joining me.